Welcome to Designing Hollywood. I'm your host, Phillip Boutte. Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest today is the epitome of effortless cool, but she would never say that about herself. She is adored by all her collaborators, not just for her unique design sensibilities, but because she takes the time to build a strong wall of trust. She is honest and always nothing but her true self, and that's a skill that serves her well in finding the core root of every character that she touches. Her projects have a massive range and showcase her capacity for working across multiple platforms. She will casually just disappear to do a massive music video with Justin Timberlake and Jay-Z for the song Suit and Tie, and then dive headfirst into massive world-building projects like Hunger Games: Catching Fire, Westworld, or the Jason Momoa-led drama See for Apple TV. Her current project, Mank, directed by David Fincher, for whom she's been a longtime collaborator, is garnering positive attention due in part to her incredible attention to detail, texture, silhouette, and study of the 30s time period. And let's just add that the film is in black and white, which presented its own challenges, but we'll get into that later. It's my pleasure to introduce one of my dearest friends and favorite humans, Trish Summerville.
Hi, Phil. Wow, that was so nice.
I try. I was very
Oh,
stuffed up with that, but yeah, I just wanted to say
yeah.
I got Trish here. So we want to ask, I always start with the boring question. So the boring question is, I want you to tell our viewers how you got into the field of costume design.
I think originally I actually didn't really know costume design even existed. I went to FITM, so I went to fashion design school, and in my head I thought I would do a line of ready-to-wear clothing, or just figuring out doing some kind of a line of clothing, and then kind of stumbled into doing assisting on music videos, and then doing my own music videos and commercials. And then I was really lucky to work with a couple great costume designers, like Michael Kaplan and Ariane Phillips, and then just kind of moved into doing my own thing. So yeah, it was just a little bit of a progression, but yeah, the idea of that doing clothing for film and television didn't really occur to me when I was in school.
Was there any like initial, was there a moment where you felt like, yeah, this is what I want to do? Or like one moment where you just really got into saying like, yeah, I like this a lot. I think I should explore it.
I think it was, I mean, I still like doing all aspects of creative costume design, whether it's like videos, like, I mean, I did a Skrillex video, is probably the last video I did, the red lips. And I love that, because we got to build
Wonderful.
everything. Yeah. And like working with the bone breaker dancers, and like, that was really challenging. But I think, I do lean more towards probably film and TV in a way, because it's much more world building, because it's a longer span of time, and with TV, with film, what I really like is I like having the whole script ahead of time, so I can see all the character arcs, so I can figure out where I want to put things and how I would like the characters span to grow, and you have the end of it, so you know what it's going to be. And in a way, TV is nice and challenging, because as you know, it's like you could get a script the day it works, and you have to figure out like how to make that happen. And, there's all these surprises. So I think, I kind of leaning there. I've not done, theater really. So I'd also love to explore that.
Is it kind of like, do you feel like between going the different paces of the project helps you kind of avoid burnout as well? Like it's nice to do a video, and then like it's nice to do something episodic and kind of, and then a big film. Does it help you to kind of avoid that burnout feeling, or just like approaching different projects, same kind of thought process, but different, time frames and stuff like that?
I think so. I mean, I think I try and just choose particularly the project. And I mean, there's probably a lot of us, and I know you have this thing where you're on something, and then there's some other project that's really drawing you to it, and you have to really outweigh, can you give your whole self to that and make this balance? So I think more so than choosing like doing a film, a TV, a commercial kind of thing, it's more that whatever the project is, if it really speaks to me, I'll try and figure out how to make it happen. And I mean, I'm probably not the best at taking time off, but as or you can relate to that. So
It's true.
it's hard when there's something you really want to do. You're like, oh my god, how am I going to make this work, and just give it my all.
There's one thing that I will say about you too, is that one of the things that I respect about Trish is that she also takes on projects that her heart's behind, meaning that you'll never find Trish on a project where she's miserable because she didn't want to take it on in the first place. Like, that's something that I think, it's like they'll say there's this big movie and it's awesome and it has all these stars, and she's just like, nah, like, nah. That's like, it's something where it's like it has to call to her sensibility for her to really want to do it, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've had just a couple of situations like that, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like there was a really big project, big studio thing at the same time as Boy Erased.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to do Boy Erased. I wanted to be a part of telling that story. And I knew for the other project, it would have been well over a year's time. And I'm like, I can't be connected to that for a year
Mm-hmm.
because my heart's going to pull me somewhere else. Yeah.
It's
So I
the, it's
do.
the heart and the art of it. It's never superficial. It's
Yeah.
more like it needs to call to you to really want to create it. It's not just a job. So I think it's something where you're just like, this is something that I'm really into, and I think I always appreciate that. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that. So then the other question that I wanted to ask you, just like in kind of like feeling this out, is I find that I learn something new on every project. Do you find this similar kind of thing where you're kind of expanding the breadth of what you know, your general knowledge, and then kind of putting in what you've learned into your costume work?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's whether I learned something like with Mank, I learned to shift my brain to think completely in black and white.
Mm.
With other projects, I mean, each one's different. Like on C, I got so wrapped up into like repurposing. I mean, it was like we were going to salvage yards and old computer shops and just, and like sea legacy places and taking stuff out of the ocean. So it's like each project, I definitely learn so much, and also too from like the team, from your crew. You learn so much, and you have to remain open because you might have great ideas or a great process and a way to go about something, but I always try and surround myself with people that are definitely smarter than me and have more experience than me so that I can learn from that. And then that gives you leeway to bring in people that have a lot less experience that can also learn from those other people. So it's constantly a growing kind of it's all teamwork. It's all about growing. It's all about keeping your mind open. I mean, I'm sure at times I'm quite hard-headed or really straightforward about what the project I see in my head, and I can see how I want it to be. But I try and remain open about a collective.
Do you feel like that's also a big part of your problem solving? Like when problems arise on set, it's helpful to have that kind of community and team to kind of build and push forward?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's all the positions on the crew that are really important for various reasons. And, there's you have to have a group of people, like you brought up the thing about trust. It's like
Mhm.
I have to have this thing where I trust if I can't be on set that day, that the set people that I do have will keep the integrity of what the costume is. And
Yeah.
they're not gonna, not change, they're not gonna change it. They're not gonna let the continuity slide. And the same, with like an assistant designer. For years I didn't work with an assistant designer because I just really didn't know how.
Mhm.
And luckily, I've worked with a few people that are just amazing at their jobs, and they know where, like, how to help keep me on track and like giving me these great reminders, and then also having great ideas and input, and aren't scared to speak up, but do it in a way where it's really respectful and as a team.
Yeah, I think that the collaborative nature of our teams is something that gets kind of overlooked sometimes in the grand scheme of things because there's so many of us
Right.
working, and the costume department can be massive, and there's so many jobs and so many different places to kind of check off, that I do think it's really important to kind of have that core network of people that are all pushing to one goal, but also having like a leader that can really kind of get in there and understand and manage all the different parts, but then also manage the different personalities and then understand the jobs and kind of get everybody to go in the same direction, which can be very difficult, challenging, but rewarding.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it can be. I mean, I've done shows where we've had like Boy Race. I want to say, I think our whole department we had 2 people on set, and I want to say 4 people, maybe
Mhm.
5 in the office. It was quite small. So, and I mean, I come from like music video background, so and editorial and styling. So like you do everything yourself. It's like I know how to sew, and and then I can problem solve. I can do draping. I'm not good at flat patterns, but it's like, so I love people that can float in different areas. I mean, there's a couple people I work with, one of which, Joe, and like,
Yes.
Joe comes from theater in New York. So, I love having Joe because Joe is able to do a broad spectrum of things. So when we're in foreign countries, he's able to float around and do different stuff, as am I. Like, I know in the States, like there's certain things I can't do as a designer because other people have to do it. But I love when our team is like, it's this whole focus of, checking in with each other, helping each other out, figuring out like, who really needs an extra hand, whether it's your job or not, criteria wise, but like, it's just that whole participation. Because that's the great thing about film and TV is like, you get to be part of this tribe and this team, and you all come together to make something between our department and props and hair and makeup and set deck and everything. I love that whole like camaraderie.
I feel like we were kindred spirits in the way too, just in the sense that I came up before I started costume illustrating, I was production designing. So I was doing a lot of production design for music videos. And I think it's such a big training ground for kind of getting your bearings on how everything fits together, especially because a lot of the times they can be massive. There's all these things coming on, you have your talent coming in, and then you're dealing with different parts. So you're dealing with your department, then you're dealing with like the label, and then the artist, and then their people. Like it's so many different things and kind of things to put together. And I just remember that whole process of like feeling like I had to, like, I was doing everything. I was driving my truck, I was set decking, I was doing like everything, right? And then I remember as things got bigger, I remember that feeling of recognizing the same thing, that I also needed to be more trusting. Like I needed to know this guy is a really great set decorator, and even if everything's not exactly where I would place it, the general feeling of it will be correct. And so I started to kind of back off, and then I learned how to be more of a team player, and then that taught me more about the job. So I think it was one of those things where it's like that music video land is a really good training, like battleground for learning everything.
It is. I mean, it definitely has its ups and downs about it. I mean, I know a million years ago when I did Lady Marmalade, it wasn't union yet, and so we shot for, I want to say it was 3 days, or it's the 3 days I can remember. It was 20 hours, 23 hours, 24 hours,
Mhm.
of shoot days, and it was insanity. But it's, we were sewing things and rhinestoning things and hand washing things out, and like, and repairing on shoes because you just didn't have this turnaround time to send stuff out to get it done. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's a good training ground. And then you get to like film and TV, and there's a lot more guidelines that you have to follow, and a bigger infrastructure. So, when I got to TV and film, and I was like, oh my God, wait, there's all these people that do these different things. It was
Uh-huh.
it was really great.
It's hard to kind of let go of it too, because like, what do you mean I can't touch this thing or do this thing? And like,
Yeah.
I'm so used to like getting in there and doing it, or like being like this or like that. And they're like, no, no, no. There's like 3 different people that all do that same thing. And you're like, what? Oh, we're okay. All right, fine. You like got it. I got it. I got it.
You're like, but I'm just gonna watch them
Yeah,
do
I'm gonna
this, I'm
watch
gonna
and
watch them do it a bit, and then we'll be okay. Yeah.
okay, it's fine. But it's like, yeah, that probably is the hardest part of transitioning over to, is realizing that you're in like a bigger pool and there's a lot more people and everything's a lot more I guess spaced out. Like it's like they're just like, you do this person does that, and then it's still one of those things where you're like, well, I'm gonna participate anyway. I'll just find a way to do it respectfully.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, for me, like, yeah, it is about like having that respect. And
Mhm.
also what you're saying is trust. It's like those things are massive within our department, and then outside of that as well for the whole crew. But I do think it is that, I mean, it is that thing of, I'm lucky to get to work all over the world.
Mhm.
And then it's also really hard because I'm constantly starting up with a new crew. Like, I'm on a show here in Toronto, and Joe that I mentioned earlier, he came out with me in the beginning,
Mhm.
and then now he's on another project. So I had that familiarity with him and that trust that I could build with him. But it's also learning, like you said, it's personality, it's how things are done in different parts of the world. And so every time I start a job, it's like, I may get to start in LA, but then I'm off somewhere else. And it's, there's the language barrier. You try
Mhm.
and bring in the cultural differences, and you try and be respectful to everybody, and navigating what, because I am very hands-on. I mean, I'm always going to be that way. It's just who I am. And I'm very straightforward and honest with everybody I work with of like, it's nothing against you. It's just how I function. And so
Correct.
it's that thing of like letting people know, like, I'm not saying you're doing it wrong. I'm not saying that your way is not the right way, but like, this is how I do it. And then show me how you do it. And then we'll figure out where we're going from there.
True collaboration.
Yeah, true collaboration. And then it is also filling out, like easing in and figuring people out of like what's their strong suit, you know, when you're working with somebody and moving them around in your department to figure out where they can shine their best and things that they want to do. Because I've run into in the last several years is, you know, there's sometimes people that have been on set for so long and they, like you're saying, you get burnt out, like when you refer to like film and going to a commercial for a break, you know, that are really burnt being on set. And then you kind of move them into another position in the office, whether it's shopping or buying or whatever. And then, you know, let them figure out what really works for them and what they like, you know. And I think we all kind of figure that out as we go along of what we're really good at and then where we really need a lot of help, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of balances itself out too, because then you can kind of figure out the different pieces as you go along, and then also then you figure out everyone's strengths and the things that they're really good at, and then you can like exploit those to be like, okay, and push people along. And kind of I talked about this with Ellen Morajnik in the terms of like the creative amplification of people instead of making them feel like they're getting like less creative and kind of bogged down. So I think that that's a really important skill to have. And since we're on the topic of collaborations, I want to transition into talking about some of your key collaborations because you have some great ones. So let's start with a little film called Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, that little thing.
That little old
that
film.
Easy little project.
Yeah. Walk me through this little tiny passion project film.
Yeah. Well, with that one, it was actually really my first like major feature film. And kind of the funny conversation of that part is that I didn't know David Fincher in the music video days. I hadn't worked with him then. And but I'd done I assisted with Michael Kaplan on a show that he did. And then I'd done some football random commercials and crazy commercials with him. And then I got a phone call from his producer saying, oh, Dave wants to talk to you about this project called The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And I had just gotten the book and was reading the book. And I was kind of like on the phone, like, okay, like, you know, yeah, that sounds great. I'm interested. I'd love to come in for a meeting, and kind of got off the phone. I was like, oh my God. You know?
Yeah, like what? Yeah.
This is huge. Don't screw this up. So, you know, and I have to say that was kind of, I didn't really know Fincher at that point. You know, we just worked on a few things together, and we really bonded over that job because I think partially like it's a very intense subject matter. And I have to say, working with like Rooney Mara and again, going back to the trust, like she had so much trust in him, and then she had so much trust in me, and he had so much trust in me, and we had to have that because there's some heavy scenes in that movie, and we really took Rooney through this whole transformation that happened. I mean, we cut her hair, bleached out her eyebrows, colored her hair, and pierced her all in like a 2-day time period.
Right.
And you know, it had to be this very gentle kind of process of you know, because it is a little shocking. But so with that project, it was, you know, it was I don't know why I wasn't nervous or afraid. I just felt like, oh, I'm supposed to do this. This is the film I'm supposed to do. And I could relate on so many levels of it, and knew what it should look like. And I knew what she should look like in my head as well. And again, Dave is so brilliant in this sense of, I was talking to John Burt, his production designer, who also did that film today. And we were saying how Dave's films are always so well thought through. Like he already has this plan and he's seen it start to finish in his head with music laid in and everything. So as he's describing it to you, he's throwing it out there, and then you're supposed to take that and then you go run with it and you bring your creativity to it. And he doesn't micromanage. It's like once he sees you're on this same page with him in this trajectory, he lets you go and he lets you run with it. And I'm really grateful for that experience. Because it will always be a film that's extremely dear to my heart because of the overall experience of it. We all lived in like this same complex all together. I'd go up at night, you know, I would be sending him emails at night in the middle of the night, and then he'd respond, and I was like, why are you awake? And he's like, oh, I'm doing some editing. And then he's like, why are you awake?
Yeah, why are you awake? Yeah.
And then I'd run up and like look at little edits that he'd kind of done and look at stuff. And so we all developed this really tight-knit family, and like Rooney and I spent so much time together, and we, so it was really fantastic. And you know, I didn't realize like the scope of, at the time, of like how near and dear her character is to the Swedes, and how eager they were to see this Lisbeth Salander. So that was also really cool. And I had a great team. I mean, a lot of them, it was their first time working on a film, but they all really wanted to do a great job. It was all locals, and so it was hard. It was really, really, really hard. And in the sense there's not really the union. So it was like I was aging and dying, and I worked set with the girls on some of the first nights of the craziness of going in the water. So it was a great experience.
There was something really, what I love about the film too is that you said there was some, like, it felt like you were almost at peace or at ease doing the film. There's something very personal and natural about it. Like Lisbeth, even in her transition, it all feels very, it feels progressive, but it doesn't feel forced, if it makes sense. It feels like that she just feels so much like a real person. So I feel like you kind of captured, there's like style in it, and it's edgy and it's cool, but it doesn't feel like she's trying to be any of those. She's inherently just being herself, which I feel like you just kind of naturally did, because that's kind of how you are in a sense too. It's just, she's just not trying to do anything. It's just like, I'm making these choices specifically because they come from within. And I think that that's cool. So I think that that's what reads as cool.
Ah, thank you. Yeah, Rooney was great. She was so committed, to that part, and was so, I mean, I could show her tons and tons of research, and she could figure out what she was absorbing and what she was relating to. So it was really great.
Do you find that now that your collaboration with Fincher, or just your actors in general, is kind of that same process where you're really kind of involved in like going back and forth and having that dialogue?
Definitely. I mean, I love actors. Like, I love that whole process. I love trying to help them and give what I can to help create characters. I mean, that's kind of, again, going back to what, picking scripts and things. I don't, in a bad way, I don't pick something for the costumes. I pick something generally for story, and I really hope there's some costume opportunity in it. But I think, like, with that, I love. I love working closely with the actors. I love helping them get to that place where you see that transformation happen, and I love, like, helping them shift and look different than, say, maybe they've looked before, or trying to figure out like what would be that thing that they then makes them just make that click of like, now this is who I am. Whether it's like in the fittings and you watch how their walk and their gait kind of changes, or their body posture changes. I love all that part.
There's something that I have to say too about Trish as a person, even working with her, is that I don't want to make any of it sound like it's not without work, because even though there's an inherent sense of like what you're doing and you're kind of trying to find the character, Trish reads a lot, like more than anyone that I personally know. So I remember we were together on Westworld, working together. And Trish was telling me about how she was reading all these books about Indians and like the head scalpers and all these things. And she would tell me almost every day some new book she was reading. And I started to feel really insecure. I was like, am I supposed to read? Like, I'm not reading enough. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm not reading enough stuff.
I love research, and I love knowing other people's experiences, and I mean, I love other cultures so much. I joke about like, I was born in the wrong tribe this time around.
Yeah.
I'm so drawn to like all these other things, and like the adornment and everything. And you'll laugh right now, because part of what I brought with me, I have probably 25 books that I brought with me.
That's what it is. I literally, in my head, I made a note, like almost like, I don't think I'm an adult. I'm not reading enough. I need to read more. Like, I need to learn more stuff.
Well, you're a busy guy, and you're very worldly, and you do your research. I mean, I think it's, for me, it's like, especially, I mean, I think a lot of us do this. It's like we get on a project, and then it's like, I need to know everything I can about that. I mean, I have a joke with my wife, and Lauren, I'm like, especially when we first started dating, I was like, just maybe don't look through stuff on my computer, like, there's kind of some stuff in there. It's like all work related, you know, because I'm looking at like, you know, like when we did Red Sparrow, I had all these videos of like skin grafting because we have that scene. And so I was fascinated with like, wow, this is really how you graft human skin for burn victims and then for skin replacement. And I find all that really fascinating, but like if someone were to look at my computer, they could get the wrong idea of what's going on.
My computer, especially as a concept artist, is jacked. And then what makes it worse is the algorithms think that I'm involved in all this stuff. So like when I was doing with REM, when I was working on the Madonna tour, like I have folders on my computer. It's like Catholic nuns and then rope bondage. And I'm just like, oh no.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. I've got some of
Start getting all the ads and I'm like, no, it's just for work. I tell my computer, it's like, it's not
sure
for work. Yeah, see, and it's like, sure, you like this.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know. I was like, it's the same thing about like, nobody wants to read my mind. It's a real dark place at times.
Just go for the ride, but don't go in there.
Exactly.
Now that we've talked about that collaboration, I'd like to move into something that you did with Dragon Tattoo that was awesome, which is you did a line, an exclusive line for H&M. So talk us through how that kind of came about, because that was actually a really big moment, especially in costume design, to have a costume designer front and center with their own name and like a line of clothes based off of a film.
Yeah, that was extremely exciting. And I think also too at the time I didn't, because we were just coming off of Dragon. And so I don't think I had time to really process as what it meant. I knew it was very exciting. And we had some meetings, and I have to say it was Sion Chafin, who was the producer on Dragon. You know, she was a big catalyst in that, and saw, that there's this possible connection that could happen, and realizing that at a pivotal time. And so we went and met with this amazing gentleman, Donald Schneider, and an H&M, and came out. Originally, it was just going to be like these graphic T-shirts. And then I brought in the continuity books, and we're kind of showing them what we were doing. And then I could see them kind of like, oh, and I said, look, I have experience in fashion design, and I think we could do like a capsule collection with this besides just doing graphics and T-shirts. And so they kind of went through the books, and we kind of picked some at the continuity books and kind of picked some pieces that we wanted to make, interpret into streetwear. And I have to say, with that experience, it was so great because I got to be a part of, H&M has this whole thing where they do so much stuff in-house and can source everything. So I would send them, I spent time with them in Sweden, then I came back to the States, and I would FedEx them swatches of fabrics and images. We would go over online and stuff. And so, I'd even send them knits that had like drop needle inserts of like where it looked aged and distressed, and then they could figure out how to do that. So I was able to do that. And then I went to Shanghai to work with them. And even at one point, this is like old school me, we made this jacket, and I was like, no, it's not working. We done the dress form. I'm like, no, it's not working out. And I said, oh, do you have some dot paper so I could work on a pattern? They're like, patterns are in the computer. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so old. So like, I went to school, we made patterns on dot paper, but in big companies, you don't do that. And I was like, okay, what about muslin? Do you have some muslin fabric that I can do? I can make a toile. And they're like, no, it's in the computer. And so they were great. They ran down and got me shirts that I could cut apart and then drape on the mannequin.
Oh, that's awesome.
This is the shape that I'm wanting, and they were just all lovely and pleasant and wonderful and excited about the project. So of course it made my experience great, but it also made it really great that I was so involved, like, that I was there through the entire process. And I have to say, Sion and David were a big advocate of that, of checking in with me, of how's it going today? Are you happy? What's, how's it transpiring? And that really makes a big difference, because you do feel like, even in the days when you're like, oh God, I don't know, we had two things that didn't work out today. It's like, but that's normal, because we had to do it in such a fast time period that, it was, that turnaround was so quick. And then, we had these great pop-up stores, and then the online store, and it was in 105 stores around the world. And the sellout was really quick. So, I'm really grateful for that experience, because it was extremely creative, very fulfilling. And then it also just kind of went along with like, yeah, it goes hand in hand with this film, because it's like, it was a film that could lean itself to a fashion line.
Correct. And it also, I'd say, I think the factor of people wanting to kind of collect that and have a piece of it, but then also kind of using it as self-expression was kind of cool. And then having, like I said, again, like not being aware, but having that face of like costume designers being able to participate in like the real world outside of the film world to kind of give something back to the community, I thought was a really great step in allowing people that follow to be able to do those types of collaborations as well. So it was, I think, a big moment.
It was a really big moment, and I think the other things that stood out to me that were really, that I was super flattered and really honored about. And you're just like, oh gosh, like it's just, it's you makes you also feel like you got that character right. Was things about, like I styled the editorial spread for Rooney with W Magazine, and it was all based on Lisbeth Salander, and so that was really great and fun. And then also seeing like the next season on the runway of this look, that was happening. And not saying it's an original look, because she's based off of punk and goth and all those things, and street kids and crust punks and stuff. But it was great to see like there was that influence of, people got it and got that this wasn't just a character. This is truly like a real person. And this was her own personal style. So it was really cool to see it end up on runways as well.
And then after that, later on, you did another collaboration for Hunger Games Catching Fire, which is the job that we met on.
Yeah.
So talk us through that a little bit, and then we'll have some fun talking about Hunger Games.
Yeah. So with Hunger Games, for Catching Fire, because I only did the Catching Fire film. That a lovely lady named Paula, who was with Lionsgate at the time, who she talked to me about doing, like, let's try and do something with Katniss in a line. And originally I wanted to do a men and women's capsule collection for Catching Fire, and they wanted to really, and I understand, really just go towards the Katniss fan base. And so with that, it was a completely different experience, because like, say for H&M, we did like double-digit thousands of units and produced, and it was that was a specific price range. And then like with Net-a-Porter, it was a higher price point but with a smaller amount of units. And we did both lines. We did jewelry and shoes, but with Net-a-Porter, they didn't at the time, they didn't produce in-house. So then I had to source like where production would happen. So I found, at the time I was on the movie Gone Girl, and so I would be at work, and there's a couple colleagues that you and I both know that were helping me do fabrics and things. And so I'd be at work all day, and then I'd go to the graders at 2:00 in the morning, because he was grading out of his house, and then work on that. And we were shipping stuff out of the country to have produced. So there were completely two different experiences, but really both fulfilling. And it gave me a broad spectrum again of like, there's a level of like where you think, what I was saying about the computer and the patterning of like, oh gosh, I don't know all this. But then in the problem solving and the designing part, I was like, oh my God, so all this stuff from school really has kicked back in. And it's also stuff that relates to what I do every day in my normal job, every day of costume designing. And then I work really closely with the cutter fitters and then the workroom. So all that stuff really kicked in. And so both experiences were great and vastly, vastly different. And again, like, it was like being a part of something like, this, I dare say iconic, but like a character like Katniss Everdeen, that so many people had such a large demographic of people relating to who she was, and those books and those films was really, really cool.
I thought something that was good too there with how you kind of progressed her and kind of, changed her look a little bit in terms of kind of bringing her into a different place and kind of really focusing on how the fans reacted to her. Was you kind of, I don't want to say she grew up, but I feel like you got the film where she she understands the Capitol. She's like dealing with more things and also dealing with more things emotionally as well. And I think that you kind of brought that out in the clothing. I think also one of the key things that happened in that film was it felt like you used all the skills you had learned so far and kind of put them into that film. So you had, tons of custom pieces that you were doing for all of the characters, including Effie Trinket. That was Elizabeth Banks, lovely Elizabeth Banks. So they like just trying to figure out all of her looks, and Katniss and Peeta and all the other people. But then you also did some collaboration with some designers as well, and brought this kind of high fashion kind of look to the Capitol, because that's the way it's described in the book. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how you were able to manage your like custom builds and the fashion stuff, and like kind of how you mix those collaborations together?
Yeah. I mean, I think with that, I mean, I have to say I hadn't, when I got the call, because it's Francis Lawrence,
Mm-hmm.
who directed Catching Fire, and he and I met on music videos.
Yes.
And so he started on the film just shortly before I went in to interview. Um, and so we really had a really short time period of prep. And so when I went in to meet with him, I went to bring a presentation in for the producers, and I went met with Francis, and we're talking. And we're talking about it, and I'm showing him some kind of images, and he's just like, oh no, because I hadn't, the movie wasn't out yet, the first movie wasn't out yet, and I just got the book and started reading the book. And so I'm reading the book, and so I'm thinking in my head, it's like Lord of the Flies and Battle Royale, and I had these kids with like skin, like human skin suits on, and it was really dark, and I was like, it was like intense. And
Right.
so I'm showing him all this stuff, and he's like, oh no,
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 no, no, no.
it's a fun kids film. And I'm like, yeah, but kids are killing kids. Like people, adults are betting on kids to kill kids. And he's like, yeah, no, it's not that. It's light, it's colorful. And I was like, oh, I got to rethink this. He goes, oh, the movie will be out in a week. Go see it. And I was like, okay. So I had to readjust where I was coming from, because I was just like, this is dark.
This is real dark and scary. Yeah.
Dark, yeah. And he's like, no, 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 that's not the demographic. It's young adult. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, so I had to adjust where I was thinking and where I was coming from. And then we had such little time, and oddly, to think of it, we didn't really have a big budget. You would think
Mhm.
because of the first film, but I think it was because it was so close on the first film as when we
Correct.
started. They anticipated it was going to do really well, but they didn't say like, here's a bunch of money for you to work with. And
Mhm.
and we also had hundreds and thousands more extras than in the first one, because we saw every district this time.
Mhm.
We went into each district. So we were just trying to like really stretch our budget out and make it work. And then I thought, like, I'm gonna just try and use some of my contacts from the editorial world and music
Smart.
video world, and see who would want to contribute and participate and collaborate with me on this, and would just loan me
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I will be forever grateful. I've gotten heat on both sides. Some costume designers have kind of scolded me about giving shout outs, to designers that helped. And I have to say, like, I wouldn't have been able to clothe all the people that we had without this super gracious and generous help. I mean, it was like, I remember being on a Skype with Iris Van Herpen back then.
Ah.
Remember? Yeah, and I
Oh
was like
man.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I was so madly in love with her, like seeing all her designs, and was just so dreamy about it. And then there was, her things were in a museum at the time, and she graciously sent us those carbon fiber shoes to borrow.
Mhm.
And like Alexander McQueen. I mean, that to me was such an extension of generosity and like understanding of this character of Effie, that like that's the type of clothes she needs to wear. So I think, and like Jun Jae and all these Korean and Chinese
Mhm.
designers that were really just coming up, not that they were just coming up, but coming out into the like being known. And there's also a thing I really like to do is, I like to raise people up, and I like to raise up like designers that maybe no one's kind of known yet, but that are just so beyond creative. And like,
Mhm.
there were like jewelry designers that like loaned us jewelry. And so I just, it was amazing, and it was great. And like, I was really, really grateful for it. And Francis also understood that world because of being in music videos. So he didn't
Correct.
look at it as like, people are going to know that's a McQueen. And I'm like, I'm totally fine. People are knowing that's a McQueen, because those designs are so progressively ahead of time in our museum pieces that it all made sense to me.
All of that to me, that my 2 cents on that whole topic was I felt it was smart. First off, I felt like because it was also within the budget, it's the same. I didn't feel like any excuses needed to be made for it as well, because as a costume community, we draw from high fashion all the time. So it was really nice to actually feature them as well, as opposed to looking something like, instead of looking at Iris Van Herpen and trying to do Iris Van Herpen on a budget, it's really nice to just have Iris Van Herpen and feature it, especially because I felt like the choice served the story, which is, if you read those books, it talks about the capital being the highest of the high. Like the fashion there is so intense and so elevated. And then if you know, when you're working on films and stuff and you have your budgets, even if you had time, doing some of those costumes and designing them takes months. So it's like trying to kind of figure it out. So I felt like it was a really smart choice, but also I felt like it kind of it spoke to kind of this dirty little secret, which is, I loved that it was a costume designer collaborating with other designers, and really everybody got to win. Like it just felt very inclusive. And I think it expanded our community as opposed to closing it off and just being singular. So I thought it was a really great point.
Yeah, I mean, completely. I do feel like you're saying, it goes hand in hand. I mean, we're inspired by fashion that's out there in the world. I mean, I'm inspired by runway fashion and street fashion all the time. I mean, I'm definitely that creep that's trying to take pictures of people on the street. You know, when I'm like, oh, the aging on that is so good. You know, it's like, I'm just like, oh, trying to take a picture. But I mean, I do think, and it's also too with what the story was. It's like, you know, so we have Lenny Kravitz, who I've known for years, and we have Lenny Kravitz, who's a stylist in this. So in my head, it's like, well, yeah, this is where he would go. He would create pieces, he'd pull pieces. I mean, I did the same thing all my time doing music videos, you know, and even editorial stuff. Like we'd make pieces, we'd make headdresses, but then we would, you know, when we pull stuff from showrooms and different designers. So for me, it was just a logical choice to make.
Right.
And yeah, and for heat or not getting heat for it, it was like, you know, you didn't do my job, you don't know the time frame I had, and you don't know where my mind's at. And like, I am grateful, like I am inspired by these people, and I think I, you know, I want to show that work, and I want to put them, you know, on a big screen. And and you know, I think it's like it is that thing of like appreciation as well. Like I appreciate, you know, seeing, like, still, I mean, there's so many designers that I'm so inspired by, that like, and now on Instagram you can just scroll through and look at all the things that they're doing constantly, and it's just, yeah, it's inspiring. So I wanted to give tribute to that.
Now, we talked about Francis a little bit, but that also led to a collaboration on Red Sparrow, which, and that was also Jennifer Lawrence again. And I think that what's cool about that project is that you got to see a different side of Jennifer. It kind of was a progression of her as an actress, but also a lot of that was based on what she was wearing in the film as well, and kind of pushing that character forward. So can you talk to us about all the little notes? Because you had, like, you know, ballet, you had all of these different things in there that were really kind of just dramatic and striking. So just walk us through that collaboration quickly.
So yeah, so with that, it was again trying to shift her from being, you know, this character that we saw in all the Hunger Games film,
Mhm.
and shifting her into this adult, extremely adult role of being, you know, an assertive woman, or somebody who's having to survive, somebody who's against a lot of challenges in her life, and then how she still remains to keep it in control, and that she's in control. So yeah, with that, I just wanted to, I mean, Jen she has a great shape, and she's, you know, she's really easy to work with, and really, really lovely and very funny. So, you know, it was great to dress her. And we did the same thing. Like we built a lot of it, we shopped a lot of it. And then like with the ballet costumes, what was really great was, you know, it was just, I'd never done a ballet before. And so with her and her dance partner and all the maidens, we had to make these costumes that were really functional. Besides having to look good on the stage and then on camera, it was like figuring out how they could really wear them to dance. And, you know, with the men's costumes, like you opened it up and it almost looked like a marionette inside. There were so many elastics and and how the sleeves fit in for them to move. And then, you know, we had to make doubles for Jen's dance dumble as well. So,
Mhm.
and matching the bodies, because their bodies are different in height. So making sure, you know, I mean, we all know in our industry, we all know Mary Ellen, you know, from Hargate, and
Yes.
who is the mastermind of masterminds when it comes to costuming and patterns and embroidery. And so she was really great with us. And Greg Hopwood, that, you know, did, you
Mhm.
know, did the graphics for the embroidery and worked. And it's so much math that you don't even understand that goes into that. So that's another thing where you need like an amazing team of what their strong points are, and you showing them what you need and what you want, and then they make it happen, you know. So
No, I love the just the collaboration process between all of the different artisans and the textures that you put in there. I also want to go back and draw really quick because it made me laugh, which is when you were talking about Jennifer's humor, because she is very funny. But I felt like you brought out a lot of that in her as well in terms of just her thought processes. The first time that I saw Jen was when she came in for her fitting, and you showed her my illustration of her, and she was just like, what a beautiful Native American woman, because she was so tan. Remember? So that movie, that part was funny to me because I'll never forget that, because it just made me laugh so hard, because at the time the movie hadn't really it was coming out. Yeah. And so there weren't a lot of pictures of Jen online. So the pictures I had to pull, she was very tanned in Photoshop. Yeah. Like, she's pretty. She looks Native American. Yeah. I was like, note to self, tone down the skin tone. Exactly. Like, was super fun. Yeah, just pull it back a little bit. But I remember laughing about that. Yeah.
And I think it's time for a cheers.
Okay, it is time for the cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
I've got some tequila from the Rock.
I got a little mezcal on the Rock.
Cheers, cheers.
Cheers, cheers.
Okay, and while we're doing that, let's do the
cheers. Drinking and designing.
I want to get into one more thing before we get into your most current project. I want to talk about C.
Yeah.
See on Apple TV, because I know you love this project. We talk about like silhouette and texture a lot, but this project had so many challenges with that. It's basically
challenges.
Challenges. It's basically like with multiple S's. Yeah. It's a project where you had to basically design for the human race after a virus that's basically taken everyone's sight. Right. So we're now.
Not to be confused with our current situation.
Not to be confused with a global pandemic or anything that makes where everyone has to stay inside. So everyone's lost their sight, which is probably one of the more fun design problems to solve. Is what do people that have lost their sight wear? How do they construct it? What's important to them? What's not? In terms of like aesthetic, because they can't see. So talk to us about designing for people that can't see while knowing that the audience can.
That's the catch. I mean, that was early on. Again, that was with Francis Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And it was my first time working with Jason Momoa, and just talk. We did so much research, and again, it's like talking about with the team, because on a lot of projects I would just go down this deep dive and do all my research myself, and on this one I actually had, enough crew starting off that like I had other people like Anna Seltzer that we all kind of know, and she was just like. Like I would just show her things and then she'd be like, and go into this amazing research. So it was great to have somebody else doing all this research with me. And they like kind of and really understood it. And then we started talking about all the challenges. And then I was speaking with Francis and with like Jenno Topping, who's the producer from Churnin, about, the challenges we're going to have is dealing with, what can we have? What is repurposing? What's the history behind these people? Where do they live? Is it just contained to the United States? What region of the United States? What's the weather conditions? What animals do they have? So it's massive as to what you're thinking when you're kind of creating this world that we've not seen before. And so for us, it was, it was me even figuring out, like, I would compile these folders of what animals and trees and vegetation, flora, fauna that I needed to see at some point in the film to justify where I was getting things. And then you have to also understand, like, well, we need to keep the audience engaged, because if we're just this gray palette or gray goods, yes, that's beautiful at first, but then where does this go? Because then that just starts to become the same and get quite old. And then looking through history and we did a lot of research on people with impaired sights and then were sightless. And we found all this incredible stuff all over the world of like incredible weavings, whether it was rugs or tapestries or fabrics and beading. And it was just like insane of just how intricate the details in the work could be. And then we went through a whole process of like, I wanted to repurpose things. I wanted it to be, you know, all the things that we'd left behind. And I had these crazy charts of like how long it takes things to degrade and decompose. And
Yes.
it became extremely upsetting and frightening to myself and my entire department as how long certain things take. And then I started the whole like, nobody can use disposable baby diapers ever again. And none of it, you know, it's like, no one can use tampons that come in casings. No, no, no. You know, it was
No,
like,
no, it's gonna stay on the earth forever.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was just so, and no fishing wire, you know, it was just like, because it's things that take 400 years.
Yeah, to break
So
down.
yeah, to break down. And so we became very conscious of that, which that was one of the great learning curves on this project, was like what we became conscious of. And also and certain type of fibers. So, you know, we just started compiling these crazy boards of everything, like everything that could inspire me to make clothing, and where we would get it from and how we would make shoes, and using tires, you know, tires to be the bottoms of shoes, and what was left over. And so one of the things, and the production designer on this, Caroline, and I'm going to mispronounce her name, is Hanania, is brilliant. I mean, her mind and my mind meshed in this way where we could feed off of each other and be like, hey, I want to use this. Where can I see this? And she would be like, oh, hey, I'm going to build houses this way. And so it was just different things of bringing to her like, oh my God, I found all these uses for plastic bottles, like in Asia, that they make, you know, stand-up paddle boards and islands and boats. And so then she made a whole town, a whole village out of just trash, just plastic bottles that were all together. And then we started going to junkyards and just pulling stuff out of junkyards and trash heaps and stuff. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have to say that what you're talking about right now, I don't want to get past it because it's one of my favorite moments in the show is when the two of you are working together, meaning it's when the queen addresses her subjects and she's got on all this texture. I think she even had her headpiece on with the dangling things. And then behind her, there's like all of these ropes with the knots, but then you find out that the ropes with the knots are like Braille, like it's their language. It's like the rules, like their constitution. So to see her in front of that in that setting, like it's perfect. It's the perfect mix of production design and costume design working together. It's literally my favorite scene because of the way those visuals work together.
I mean, Caroline is she was really brilliant. And then it was the thing of like, neither one of us came from a place of ego at all. It was just like, hey, look at this. Hey, look at this. I mean, you know, we even went so much into like just so many things about animals, as well as like how animals live and can sort things by color and or shape and size. And then it was looking at a lot of like our forefathers and looking at like craftsmanship and metal work from hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and how then that could translate and be, you know, this heritage thing that's handed down and handed down and handed down, so that it is a craftsmanship, whether you could see or not. It's the tactileness of how something felt. Like with the helmets, you know, one of our big challenges was trying to make these helmets that didn't have eye holes, because you don't realistically need that, but for camera, but realistic for shooting. How are these stuntmen riding horses and fighting when they have a helmet on that has no eye holes?
Right.
You know, so there was so many challenges, but you know, and it just became this. And I have to say, like the team that we had, you know, there's Jim Tyson and Don Line, who put together this amazing team of people in Canada that they'd worked with for many years, that never once said to me, what? I would run over and be like, okay, so I'm inspired by all the telephone wire repurposing in South Africa, and I want to make a posture collar and a corset out of this, you know. And it would just be this whole thing of like, never what. It was like, okay, let's see how we can figure out. It was, everyone was up for the challenge and the expression, and like, we're going to make stuff you've never made before, because we're going to make it possibly from garbage. You know, so it just became great. And then like you have somebody like Sylvia Hoeks, who plays the queen, who, you know, I can't say enough about her, because it was freezing and pouring down rain, and she would wear like a silk slip, you know. And then we did all this botanical dyeing and literally rusting. We'd wrap garments up in rust and soak it in water, wrap it in metals and soak it in water for days and weeks. And then you get these rust patterns. And, you know, and the breakdown team in LA and in Vancouver were incredible, because they were up for trying any type of technique. And we would run around and gather up flowers and eucalyptus from all our neighborhoods and bring in these bunches, and then just do all this botanical organic dyeing. you know. And yeah, one of my favorite costumes is the one you're talking about, is the queen. You know, there's this woman Janice that did felting, and we Dawn Line found her, and she makes huge felted installations for museums, and she
Right.
made fabric for us that was unbelievable, like something that was just very one of a kind, really beautiful. And I wanted it to look like, you know, kind of like decaying worms on the queen. And she took this velvet and turned it into this incredible, majestic fabric, you know. So it was every day we had like these new fun projects that we were working on. So that one speaks really loudly as well to my heart, because it was, you know, it was, you could do anything you could conjure up in your imagination, you could do.
I enjoy that one. I want to encourage any of our viewers that haven't seen it to go back and watch it and think about the things that she's saying, because it really was a labor of love. The texture in it is incredible, but also just thinking about the fact that like you're trying to conceptually, like as a concept artist myself, you're constantly thinking about the concept and the conceptual part, but just thinking about a world where people can't see, but then also trying to make it interesting for people that can, is really difficult, because you, to a certain extent, yeah, color doesn't matter, pattern doesn't matter, because it's not like they're going to make something, oh, this is symmetrical, like it's more about the other senses. So I enjoyed that, and I think also I enjoyed kind of your collaboration with the overall process with Francis, with the production designer. I know you had a really good relationship with Jason too. You guys had fun.
Yeah, we did. We had good fun. And I have to also say, like, you know, we did have you know, quite a few of the principals and of the background talent were sight impaired and or blind.
Yeah.
You know, the electrocution scene where the queen, the same scene with that coat,
Mm-hmm.
those two actors are both blind
Yeah.
actors, sightless actors. And it became this thing where I was figuring out how, because they would say what, you know, and we tried to do stuff that was very textural, and then
Mm-hmm.
doing buttonholes so they could dress themselves as well, that like were very tactile and had different shapes and different sizes, so they knew which one went with which loop, and
Mm-hmm.
explaining that to them. And then it became this thing of like, where for my brain, which helped me was, you know, I would be asked, there was the female actress that's in that electrocution scene, she asked me, what color is my coat? And so I, you know, for me, I had to say, well, do you, you know, what, have you been to many oceans? Yes. And I said, okay. And so I would describe for me the smell and the scent of like an ocean, that I could see what it looked like. Or I would go back then to like scents, and what a scent was of a rose, like trying to describe, or a particular flower, describe a color by a scent, or a feel of a rock, like to get color. So then for me, it became this really interesting thing of like using another part of my brain to associate, you know, a tactile feeling or a smell with a color.
Right.
Mm.
Which is kind of, that's a whole overall process. And then thinking, I think it's fun too to hear about how the people that couldn't see reacted to their clothes, because then you can learn more as well about like what the overall kind of, you know, approach would be. So I want to transition now we're in another toasting moment, which is, let's talk about the project that you were doing now, which is Mank. So
Cheers to Mank.
our grand character of Gary Oldman plays a drunk, basically. So we are going to
Double cheers
a
to
double
Mank.
cheers. Speak about this process and how this project came along, and then how you got your mind wrapped around it, knowing that it was going to be in black and white.
So again, it's David Fincher, another mastermind. And at this point, like Dave and I have a really good, we have a really good relationship. You know, we're really honest with each other, and it's always a pleasure to work with him. You know, he definitely sees, like I was saying, start to finish. He's got it in his head. He's like, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this, and then go, you know? And so with when I first started and knew it was in black and white. So for me, that was another like, oh my God. So it's Fincher, it's period, it's black and white. Like, could this get better? Oh wait, Gary Oldman's in it. Oh my God, you know? So another really great dream project that you can check off all your boxes with. And then when I started, the assistant that worked with me on this, Corey Deist, who was really, really great and very, also has such a good eye. So it was this balance that we could have. And he and I got to the point where we could see something and be like, that'll look like pale gray. We started being able to register how colors would come up. And
Yeah.
so when we first started, it was kind of Corey, myself, and Joe Sigliano would go to the rental houses and start pulling out clothing in patterns, in solids, different colors, and photographing them in the 3 settings in my phone. And then I sent them immediately, like to Dave, of it in color, and then it in the noir, and then the other 2 settings,
Mhm.
monochrome, and sent it to him and said, I know this isn't it, but which of these is the closest to how you are going to shoot it? So I have
Yeah.
a gauge to go off of. And he was like, shoot it in noir. And so then we kind of shared that information with everyone of like, we're shooting everything in this. And he was, and he and Eric, the DP, were like, yep, telling everybody, shoot it in noir. This is where we're going to kind of go. And so from there, that's how we shot everything. And it really helped us. Like we would pull in fabrics and do fabric swatches and samples. And then even with buttons, laying it on, laces, feathers, anything we had, and shoot it kind of that way in the phone. And it really helped us grasp how things would translate, because it is different than what you think. Because in the beginning, everyone was trying to say like, oh, you can just shoot, just buy black and white clothes, rent black and white clothes, build black and white clothes, and it'll be fine. And that's not the case at all, because black just totally goes away. We use very, very, very little black in the film because it
Correct.
just absorbs all the color and goes flat. Even for the funeral scenes, it was navies, browns, charcoals, eggplant, emerald greens. Like that was, a lot of the women are in emerald green and like aubergine and Bordeaux tones, and the men are in the browns and the navies and stuff, so, and charcoals. But so I think it was that thing of like, again, the great challenge was like shifting how you thought about things. And again, just very, very lucky to work with a really talented, very kind production designer that would let us go, because he had massive research. And so, pre-COVID, I could go to his office anytime I wanted
Right.
and just check out everything he had on his walls and look at where he was going, and just constantly sharing. We would share information back and forth about like even the simplest things you don't think of, like at the political party, the balloons he has to drop. And
Correct.
figuring out what color those balloons can be, because they can't be black and white balloons because that doesn't
Right.
work. So we would just share things of like, these colors work great. And then he and I came to an understanding, before involving Dave, of we have to figure out what colors we're going to contain things to for your eye on set, and what
Right.
the actors actually have to wear, and making sure that it was pleasant to look at on set, and then also translated really well into the monitor of how it was going to look on a screen, because we shot in black and white, and so watching all the monitors, everything transitions into black and white. But I didn't want to have you know the characters of Lily Collins's character Rita be in orange or chartreuse or bright pink, that looked great on the monitor in black and white, but then kind of was a little bit too much for her character in that
And
scene.
they were seeing,
So
right.
it was just trying to figure out this balance, and then also the balance of we did want to have some print in there, because it was really, especially for the 40s, when we see them, um, different prints that we really wanted to represent. And figuring out like how subtle they had to be tonally was much better, because things kind of just went really like confetti and popcorny
Mhm.
and became too contrasty. So yeah, it was just kind of just playing around. But after a short period of time, like Corey and I would be like, and that will look like Dove Gray, and that like we kind of were playing this game with each other. And then we went on these crazy escapades, because at the time when we were shooting this, I think there was like 9 or 10 other productions. There were also between film and TV that took place between the 30s and the 40s. So clothing was really hard to come by for background. We built probably 90% of all our principles, and then we built a handful of stuff for the background of like basics. Pants, skirts, and men's dress shirts are really hard to come by without the collars just being destroyed. So Corey and I, we would be like, oh, okay, so today we're driving to the Deep Valley. We're meeting a vendor in a motel room to look at what they have. Or, we're going out to this, when we were shooting in Victorville, we went out to this place, that was like this whole kind of a half a block long of storage containers that had clothing and costumes and everything in it. And then, one day we're in the back of a U-Haul looking at clothes. So it was just trying to find stuff wherever you could find it.
Did you feel as though like once you got to that process, then did you now that you're like kind of versed in the colors and you're looking at that, you're going between like the pastels and the, you know, the deep burgundies and all of that, how did you then go from that and then transition into like the silhouettes of the characters and kind of picking, because I had read that you had talked about how it was like a socio-economic thing too, and Hollywood's like trying to figure out like who could afford what and what they'd be wearing. So how did you start to approach the silhouette studies?
So with those questions, it is what's great about Mank is I did get to address every character from like people that were surviving the Depression era and were out of work to then, you know, like a Marion Davies and a Hearst character that's the upper echelon. So it was just doing a lot of research, and you know, with the real life characters, there's tons of, not tons, but there's a substantial amount of photographs that you can look at for them, and then looking at old Marion Davies films, looking at, you know, there's a lot of photographs of Mank on set, behind the scenes with his family. And then Hearst, there's a lot of photographs, the circus party, there's photographs. So just kind of compiling this all together. And for us, like Mank is, it's a real life project. It's like the look at the man. It's not him being this Hollywood icon. And so, you know, just trying to figure out how, because we have so many kind of men in scenes together, all the writing rooms, those kind of things, and giving each character their own individuality. So it's looking at someone, say like a Thalberg, who was younger, traveled the world, was married to a famous Hollywood actress. So he was kind of our more fashionable guy. He was on the edge of what was fashion at the time. He was current and present. So, you know, he had fuller trousers. He had double-breasted suits that were really, really tailored and fit him. He was very impeccable. And even to his hair was very impeccable. Then you look at a character like Hearst, who, you know, is extremely wealthy, but he's an older gentleman and he's very set in his ways and he's very classic. So even though he had money to be very fashion present and fashion forward, he was very classic in his shape. So his trousers were slimmer, his suit jackets were longer. His fit wasn't great, even though he could have his clothes tailored. But looking at old research of him, his shoulders kind of didn't fit in the right places.
Mm.
We made sure he was someone who had a pocket watch, because that kind of dated him as well, as where the younger men had wristwatches. And then you look at like Mank, who, you know, didn't really fit into that kind of society and didn't really want to impress as far as like physically how he looked. He was much more known for like his wit and his writing.
Right.
And so with him, it was also showing like his drinking, his weight gain, and the progression of time within that. So Gary was fantastic. Like I think he put on, it was probably 12 to 15 pounds, but doing things of like making his shirt collars too tight so that he could have a double chin at times.
Perfect.
Yeah, because in his real life, he's really fit and very slim. So,
Right.
you know, and it was like, where do we decide, even though the trousers of the time should sit high in the waist to kind of exhibit his belly, we would put them under his waist as he got older. So, and again, keeping him rumply, having sweat stains and kind of cigarette burns on his clothes to kind of show the sloppiness of him. So it was just doing that, and then figuring out like logically of this time, how many articles of clothing could someone have in their closet, you know? And
Correct.
so that goes to like your question, and like Lily's character, you know, she's basically a girl from the steno pool. She doesn't have a lot of money, but she wants to read as professional, and she knows she's going away on this adventure. She thinks, she's been told he has 90 days to write this. So she probably packs everything that she has. And that might be 2 suits, 5 blouses, 2 skirts, 2 pair of pants, 3 pairs of shoes. So we kind of base all the actors that were of a moderate economical status on what they would have exactly in their closet and bring that. And like Lily's character, you do see she gets more casual as she goes along. She's very uptight and prim and proper, shirt buttoned all the way up, in a suit, hair back perfectly, makeup perfect. And then as her and Mank develop this relationship, and she understands that they have this friendship and this understanding, and they're quite protective of each other, and they've developed this little family in this bungalow. Then she goes to casual shirts that are more summer shirts. You know, she's in trousers, she's got her hair in a little do-rag. And so I like all that, like that progression of the reality of the characters and what they really could actually afford and have in their closets.
Well, I was going to say, you actually answered that question beautifully, and you took my next question.
Oh,
Because my next question was literally, I was just going to ask you about talking about Gary's progression and
mm.
kind of the duality of him being kind of messy, but then also having to deal with people. So, because of that, I'm going to do a double cheers to get.
Oh, well, I could double cheers you with mezcal and kombucha.
There we go. Double cheers for
Yeah, I
Mank's
mean,
for
also,
Mank's duality, and a double cheers for what Bean likes to call my daughter Alina. She calls Gary Oldman "Screaming Harry Potter Man." because of his role in him screaming. That's all she really knows him
oh
from. So
my
she's like,
God.
"Are you drawing Screaming Harry Potter Man, or you're looking at Screaming Harry Potter Man?" So
Yeah,
cheers to
that's
Miss Gary
amazing.
Oldman for being amazing.
That also just shows, right, like his range, man, which is incredible.
Incredible range of character and character development too, and really sinking into a character. I remember at one point he came to Western for a fitting, and I saw him in the hallway and got really kind of like I kind of froze. And he said, he waved and said hi. But my
Yeah.
first instinct was to like do a wand thing or something. I'm like, I'm such a nerd.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like,
Very
for me,
respectful.
it was him in Leon, the Professional.
Mhm.
Like, oh my God, he's so good in that, and like Sid and Nancy. I mean, there's so many roles. So it was great to work with him, and like really cool to have an actor just be like, I'm just putting on the weight. It was like, oh, this is
I'm just gonna
fantastic.
do it because that's what you got to do.
Yeah, and he was, and I brought this up before, like one of my favorite, when people were like, what was your favorite costume? And I'm like, oh, it's so hard to pick. But like one of the things that I loved was well, two of the things that I loved with him in
Mhm.
his fittings was like we have the beach scene, and it's these mid 30s wool swimming costume briefs, and with the little belt, and he was
Yeah.
just like, because it was that one or like the onesie swimming costume, and he just leaned back and rubbed his belly, and he said, no, let's show all of this. And I was like, oh gosh, yes, like speaking to a costume designer's heart.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I think that the work that you did in this film is particularly special because it really shows range too, and how you were kind of going between this specific time period with these people that we have reference for, but you kind of grounded them and made them real people. And one of the first instances before I got to see the film, I want to give a shout out to Gloria Kim,
Yeah.
illustrator, because the
Yeah.
illustrations that you guys pulled off together are very beautiful, and they're very kind of period specific. So they feel like old school costume illustrations. Can you talk about the process of when you guys were drawing and kind of figuring out like what you were going to like basically try to do?
Yeah, this was my first project working with Gloria, and I have to say, there's a group, like I try and be very costume designer friendly, and I have quite a few friends that are costume designers, and we share information. And when there's someone that works out, we're like, oh my God, try this person. And you and I joke. I'm like, Mayor Boutte, can I call you? And like I do a lot of vetting. I've had a few, luckily not too many. I've had a few really bad experiences that I have a little PTSD from.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and vet crew a lot and figure out what I'm going to get, and figure out like if it's the right person for my job. Because
Right.
for some reason, I never get like the easy job, and I don't think there's probably any easy jobs out there. But
Yeah.
so it was either Jen Starzik or Sarah Bram, when I said, hey, I'm looking for an illustrator, and like there's my
Mhm.
4 people I go to.
Of course.
They were all on jobs, and so then I ran her name by you, and you're like, oh my God, she's fantastic. So we met,
Mhm.
and I kind of gave her a brief of what it was like, and then showed her like stuff, like some of the research we did for, the like of that period we're looking at, Vogue magazines, but really also like Sears and Roebuck and J.C. Penney's, because those were catalogs that had everything from like clothing to housewares in them. And so just kind of showing her that. And then she went through and came up with all of these kind of catalogs and fashion magazines and of illustrations on her own. And then I told her I just wanted to do everything kind of in a sepia black and white kind of feel. And she did some sample stuff that was just beautiful. And I don't know if it's out yet or not, because one of the things that we have been really pushing is to show the illustrations from the film, because I do think
Yes.
that's very important. Because that is like where, you know, it's starting off with fabrics or starting with the illustrations and then finding the fabrics of what's like in your mind and in your head of what you want. And Gloria was so great about getting all these subtle nuances and the just really light brush strokes. And I really like that painterly sketch
Mhm.
kind of feel to things, and it fits so well with this project. And I don't know if it's out yet. What I was starting to say was, you know, for this circus party scene that we had, we drew a few of the characters, and then as we shot the circus party, we had her do an illustration of all these
It's
images.
incredible.
And I love the progression of it because she like lays in. So there's 22 or 24 guests at that party, including our principals. And then she, you know, did the outlines of where she'd have to place people, and then was popping in ones and then moving them around. And we put who looked nice next to each other. And then it would be like the fine tuning of things. And so yeah, it's just the illustrations are so beautiful. And I think it's so indicative of like that period as well, because everyone illustrated then. You couldn't do tear sheets of something or like boards of like, I mean, you could do it from magazines, but that's really not the way, you know, not the way costume designers work then. You had an illustrator. So yeah, she did such a beautiful job on it. So it's been really nice also to see that, like, you know, that they're posting images of
Mhm.
the illustration with the actual design on the actor side by side, which has been really great.
It's what I like to call process perfect. It's the perfect encapsulation of seeing the beginning kind of creation stage, and then you get to see the film and the whole thing come together. But the two really complement each other, and I think that that's something that speaks to the strength of your career at large. Is you have these processes. In this particular one, again, I think that one of the key things that I want to keep hitting with you specifically for our viewers is collaboration, which is you've got this project where you have this illustrations that look very classic to the period as well, and they also bring out the fun of the clothing. Then we get the full process with you working production design to make sure that everything's matching, working with director, and then at the end of it, we get to see the final product. So I think that that overall feeling just feels like a complete artistic process. It's very nice
Well,
to see.
well, definitely, because it's also, I mean, you know, it is the thing of, you know, you want to have like, you know, how you want to design things, but it is this, I do want it to be a whole concise world. You know, I want it to be this believable world. And I think a lot of what draws me to certain projects, even like right now, I'm kind of doing a fantasy-ish project, but it's like there is that authenticity that speaks loudly to me, even if it has to be whimsical. I
Correct.
have to figure out where it's derived from. And then, you know, going back to like the thing with like, you know, starting off and doing illustrations and then finding the perfect fabrics of like, and then showing that, you know, to the illustrators of like, this is how it drapes, this is what we want. And it also goes back and then to like, then the other really intense important part of this process is the workroom. You
Correct.
know, if like on this job we had Marilyn Matson, who, you know, is like a master at her craft. And one of the challenges we had, I mean, we had a few challenges with costumes on this, but one of them was like that gold lame dress
Yes.
that Marion Davis wears at the mayor birthday party and then out into the moonlight. Like, you know, it was kind of became that joke. I'm like, oh, this is why people don't really use lame anymore. Like, it's so particular and so delicate, and like you can't make mistakes because it all shows, and you can't press it and you can't really steam it. And, you know, and so, and Marilyn is so great about letting me go over and explain to her and do draping, because like I said, I can't do flat patterning, but I can drape to kind of explain what I want. And I did a lot of that on C as well. And that's the like this group collaboration of me explaining, and I may not have always the right dialogue of like, this is how I want the sleeve to drape, but I want the body to be bias cut and
Right.
and fitting. And, you know, and she's very patient and she's so knowledgeable. And then we were ordering in all these old catalogs of 1930s patterns, and then I'd bring her, you know, I'd pull something from a rental house and bring it to her and be like, oh my God, this sleeve, like the coat that Marion wears, that's actually a powder blue when she's exiting MGM. Like, I brought her these dresses and we're like, can you make a pattern of this coat? And then she'd come to me and like, look at this amazing pleat that's in here. And it was like, it was great because we were both discovering different techniques at the time, where I
Perfect.
think like she knows everything in the whole world. And she's like, look at this weird pleat in these men's pants, you
Yeah,
know? So,
did you see this?
yeah,
Yeah.
so it was really, really cool to have everybody kind of feeding off of each other and making discoveries and then sharing it, you know? So it was a great process. And I hadn't done, you know, a full period project before. So that was also really new and exciting to me.
I want to just give a shout out to Marilyn too and say Marilyn is a cutter fitter seamstress. She's amazing, and her range, what Trish is talking about right now, to go to a period piece like this, she's really knowledgeable about form and fit and like the way things fit on the body and all of the technical aspects. But I also want to give her a shout out for being one of the key people that basically created the entire visual language of costume for Marvel, which is a lot of the jobs that I work on in terms of all those superhero suits. That's also Marilyn. So I just want to give the range of the breadth of like our talent and our pool of costume of her being able to do stuff like Mank and then also do stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like a massive shift, you know?
It is. I mean, it is definitely speaks loudly to like her craftsmanship and her dedication and her pride to like what she makes. And also, you know, she's probably one of the few people besides Jen Lawrence that was on the entire Hunger Games
Correct.
series. Like she did 1, 2, 3, and 4, you know, and I think that's a big thing. And like you're saying, like she can do these 1930s projects and then do Star Trek, you know,
Yes.
and Marvel Euro jersey like crazy. But then, you know, I mean, that was the thing when we started on this, and I was really hoping she could do it. And called her, and I was like, we're gonna make gowns and dresses, and
Yeah.
you know, like Marion's picnic dress too. That's like just really delicate organza, and then mitering up all the plaid so it fit, and this perfect little ruffle around her shoulder, and getting it to fit impeccably. Like, you know, that is like definitely craftsmanship that sadly is really hard to find anymore. I mean, it's like all these beautiful trades that we really need in our industry, like milliners and cobblers, and you know, that are just, and embroiderers are just kind of really disappearing. And it's really special, really precise work. I mean, I think she's, you know, she should have the 3 M's and add magician to the last
Yeah.
name, you know.
Wizard, magician,
Yeah. Mhm.
voodoo, magic, you know, anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wanted to give a shout out to that because we do have craftspeople, and I just like that you were calling attention to all the different ones.
Yeah, or like Patrick at Western that made us
Correct.
beautiful hats. Like it's so hard to find milliners, you know, and then to be, you know, be able to resource like all these trends. I mean, I'm so grateful. You know, I mean, I'm constantly saying like, oh my God, let's just try to buy as much as we can from ISW, because if they ever went away, which is one of our main fabric sources,
Hmm.
you know, or like rag finders downtown, like all these places that you can't take for granted. Like you have to help these people stay in business, because it's hand in hand. Like we need them so much more than they probably need us.
Well, considering to any of our listeners or viewers, I want you guys to also be encouraged to not only just design, but if you are interested in craftsmanship, that's heavily needed. The craftsmanship of building the costumes, making them. We have wonderful ager dyers that make costumes look new or old or distressed. Craftsmen people or crafts jobs are, you know, milliners, all of those things are really important to what we do. And then also the sourcing, like the fabric sourcings and all of that stuff. So it's
And
a
I am,
process.
yeah, and also speaking loudly to like supervisors. We know
Yes, correct.
that, I mean, that is, you know, that's the start of, for our listeners, that's the start of every job. You know, it's like I get hired on a job, and my next step is I have to find a supervisor that fits well with my project, and also is really talented and is very strong and very solid, works well with the team. And that's becoming really, really hard to find, you know. So you know, I think there's so many aspects of like the industry and our department particularly that people don't
Correct.
understand exist. But it's like, you know, I'm constantly, you know, I'm looking for every person in that department, the great set person, the great researcher, breakdown artist, dyers. It's all of it, you know. It takes an entire tribe to like make this happen.
Well, I do. I want to congratulate you on Mank because I think you did a really good job and just overall, like where you're going. Do you have any projects that you're working on now that you can share, or anything that's what's up next for you?
Right now I'm in Toronto. It's a little colder than LA.
just, just a
Yeah,
little bit.
just a little bit. Yeah, so I'm in Toronto right now, and I'm working on a project called Slumberland, which I have made the joke of that it will be, I think, my first project that my entire family from age 5 on up can see, because generally I'm kind of in the projects that are there's decapitations and blood, you know. So I mean, Mank was one of them, but that's a very kind of heady, adult film. But like, yeah. So the next project I'm doing is called Slumberland. It's with Francis Lawrence,
Mhm.
who I really, really enjoy working with, and is really brilliant. So yeah, so I'm here doing that, and we're doing really well during COVID. It's a Netflix project, and I feel that they have it really, it's, I feel really safe. We don't run
Good.
into challenges. We're finding things to laugh about like every day. I have a lovely team here, which are all new people I've never worked with before, and
Mhm.
yeah, and it's going really, really, really well. It's I think it's going to be fun. Yeah, it's a cool project.
So you feel like even with COVID now, you guys have figured out the protocol things, you feel safe and like everything's kind of melding together in a good way?
Yeah, I mean, we have like, like right now, because we're in fittings, we start shooting on Monday. So we're tested, the red zone group, we're tested 3 times a week.
Mhm.
We wear masks all day long. There's constant reminders of like what self-care is, what mental care is. And Netflix has set up some really great websites on, exercise, mental health, things you can tune into, and then in our department we check in. It's like we all check in with each other and kind of say, how's everybody doing? Besides physically taking care of yourself, what are you doing mentally to take care of yourself? We try and keep it light in the office, and I think we have like the protocol every day of the questions we have to answer and how we're feeling and taking our temperature. But I think overall I'm really grateful to be working, but I don't feel unsafe or stressed about work. I feel it's as kind of normal as it can be. We're still dealing with all the same things. We're dealing with like our time crunches, and
Mhm.
we're dealing with like trying to fit the actors. And I mean, I think that's probably a challenge of like, you're doing fittings with actors, and it's trying to figure out how to pull yourself back a little bit. I'm so hands-on, and I'm on set all the time, and I'm in every department all the time. And so it's trying to make everyone feel comfortable and remembering what your protocol is before approaching anyone. And but like with the fittings with actors, it's just so funny that we're taking fitting photos and they have a mask on, and that kind of a thing. So you definitely are making adjustments, but it's not undoable. And I think you can keep it very, very safe. And I think as an industry, I think our stats look really good.
Mhm.
I think we're setting a good example. I could be wrong, but I feel like we're setting a good example, like, as far as cases being very low overall in our
Right.
industry. Because I think we're all really grateful to be working, and I think we do help stimulate the economy. You look at like the amount of even daily lunches that productions are ordering, and you know clothing and
Clothing,
fabrics, yeah, and shoes and gas and
dry cleaning.
dry cleaning. I mean, it is everything. I mean, that is why we look at why states in different countries have these tax incentives, because we do
Right.
come in as a large group of people and stimulate, like, restaurants at night and gas and parking meters. It's like it goes down to everything.
Now, do you have our final thoughts? Do you have any thoughts for our listeners or anyone that wants to get into kind of costume and is considering it, especially now, even though we're in a global pandemic, and just terms of a career, like what advice would you give to them?
I mean, I think that advice I always give, regardless of like where we're at in the world. I mean, if this is something that you're interested in doing, it's extremely fulfilling. I look at it like it's not my job; it's kind of my choice in my career. I love my job. I'm grateful for the job that I have. I love being part of a community of people that create things. And I think it's like the best things you can do is, try and take classes if you can. If you can't afford to go to like a college for it, there's so many classes now that you can even take online. There's this amazing place in Vancouver that you can take online, like aging, dyeing courses, textile courses. So I think figure out, like, try all the different things and figure out what speaks to you, and definitely read. Read.
See, there's the reading again.
Or just turn through some books. I think it's like knowing various periods, knowing just different continents and regionally, like different types of clothing that exist, and start learning about fabrics. I mean, I think that helps you if you're going to be an illustrator, an ager dyer, a breakdown artist, a designer, a shopper. If you start learning silhouettes, and just different ages of fabrics and different periods of fabrics, and knowing fabrics, that all just helps you greatly, and it'll help you figure out like where you lean more towards that you want to be.
I appreciate you coming on to the show with us today, Trish. I had a great time. I'm going to do one more cheers with you.
One more cheers. And I appreciate you, Phil. Thanks for asking me to do this. I miss you.
Of course. I miss you too. I want to thank Trish. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Gardena Cinema, which is the only old-fashioned single-screen standalone neighborhood movie theater still in operation in the Los Angeles area, owned and operated by Judy Kim and the Kim family since 1976. I'd also like to give a shout out to Lauren Glazier because I love her, and the dogs, my wife Jessica, Alina, and I'd like to thank costume designer Marilyn Batts for the platform, and our producer Martika Ibarra for all of her hard work. Thank you for joining us. You can follow us on designinghollywoodpodcast.com. We're also on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Trish, where can people follow you?
I'm so bad. On Instagram, you can follow
on
me.
Instagram, and
that is Ms. T Summerville. Yeah, you can follow me there. Yeah.
And she's saying Ms. It's MZT Summerville. I wrote it down just because I was like, whenever I put people on the spot, they're like, oh, I don't know, just find me.
And I have to give a little shout out as well to Lauren Glazier for all her support and love, and also to specifically to Mank, for Corey Dice, who I think a lot of times assistant designers don't get the recognition that they deserve, or the pay. So there's that,
Correct.
And also Joe Sigliano, who is somebody who's been with me on pretty much every project I've done. And also like that's, just somebody who works really, really hard, and to Marilyn for just helping create such beautiful costumes, and to Gloria for all the beautiful illustrations. And then 100% to David Fincher for giving me the opportunity to be a part of such a great project and collaborate with so many talented people.
Outstanding. Thank you.
And to Phillip Boutte.
Thank you very much. And I
love you, Phil.
I love you too. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Hey, this is Phillip Boutte reaching out from Designing Hollywood. Just wanted to come back on here really quick to say, after we shot our interview with our latest guest, Trish Summerville, she just was nominated for a Critics' Choice Award for Best Costume Design for Mank. So we just want to wish her a big congratulations from the Designing Hollywood family and team. And thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you to our sponsor, Gardena Cinema. Gardena Cinema is the only old-fashioned single-screen standalone neighborhood movie theater still in operation in the South Los Angeles area. Owned and operated by Judy Kim and the Kim family since 1976, Gardena Cinema has been able to transition to outdoor cinema in the parking lot for an intimate drive-in experience, and has hosted movie shoots, music video shoots, and still photo shoots for an authentic vintage-looking location. Thank you to our viewers. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Designing Hollywood Podcast on social media, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, and the YouTube channel for complete past and current episodes. Also, we're now available on Amazon and Siri Voice Search.